Good morning to you, my friends, wherever you may be in the world today. Alan Clements here from Maui, Hawaii, United States of America. Today, I think July 28, 2021. Today's sharing, activism as a state of mind. And the subtitle, An Unrelenting Love of Freedom. And I use the word activism to be the lifeblood of freedom in action. Caring enough about the quality, the characteristics of freedom to actively evolve, I want to say, those states of consciousness that comprise freedom, and bringing them, ushering them, elevating them into the world. I am not sure that I know of any more important quality that I've encountered in my life than the beauty of freedom. The freedom to live, the freedom to think, the freedom to speak, share, listen, touch, move. The yoga and the Dhamma and the Dharma and the meditation, the vocation, the raison d'etre, the purpose of my existence, the purpose of existence to evolve and elevate the attributes of freedom. Juxtapose that with take away the freedom, take away any of our freedoms, freedom of movement, freedom of speech, freedom of thought. And often one suffers the greatest loss. I don't think we can say enough about the virtues and the beauty of freedom. Freedom to challenge conditions, habits, addictions, denigrating states of inner being, and study those textures, if you will, the contraband of freedom, complicity with conformity, collusion with corruption. People often ask about meditation, the power of mindfulness. For me, the meaning of yoga, it's the felt, experiential, courageous engagement with these interior textures of consciousness. And learning their functions, their characteristics, their attributes, and doing all that one can ethically, mindfully, and spiritually to study their behaviors and to learn through time the benefit and value of either letting go of something and or developing something. Freedom and conformity, freedom and collusion, freedom and slavery, freedom and dictatorship, these dyads that right now, all over the world, we're battling, if you will, a totalitarian wave that is sweeping across continents, through our digital pathways, and radically challenged, if you will, to take up the good cause, the citizen of the soul, the citizen of the heart, the citizen of life, and make good on that promise of citizenship with spirit, citizenship with Dharma, citizenship with Dhamma, citizenship with the qualities of consciousness and the attributes of consciousness that give rise to the growing of democracy and freedom. And Daw San Suu Kyi, the tragically incarcerated state councilor, Nobel Peace Laureate, and visionary leader among many leaders in the country of Myanmar, Burma, who is right now being paraded through and around the world community through an Orwellian military tribunal run by this gentleman, this evil gentleman, Ming Online. More to the point of this talk, it was she who introduced me to a key concept that made the idea of activism so much more appealing as a state of mind and a way of life. She and the people of Burma introduced me and introduced the world, frankly, to the concept of a revolution of the spirit as a way to understand the employment of mindful intelligence, spiritual intelligence, ethical wisdom, to engage qualities of spirit. This is where the word spirit to me is much more important than the word yoga or dharma or religion or Buddhism or Dhamma. Spirit, pointing to that field of invisibility known as human consciousness, and pointing more deeply to the intimacies within that transparency. Spirit here symbolic of radical heartfulness, the deep love, if you will, of the radiance of hope, the radiance of hope. Spirit that transcends sectarianism, that transcends orthodoxy, that transcends even the role of religion, transcends Buddhism itself. And one of those remarkably powerful, inclusive terms, spirit, a revolution of the spirit. I just love the sound and the feel of that, to increase the velocity, to increase the tenacity, to increase the fortitude, to wake up, to live, to breathe in revolutionary spirit, to employ within spirit the direct experience of freedom and democracy and human rights and environmental sanctity and the love of non-humans and the air and the wind and the oceans and the rivers and God and goddesses, spirit. We're emboldened by spirit rather than money, form, dogma, religion, ethnicity, power, privilege, all the things that come with these other more seductive yet dulling energies that don't really seem to have spirit infused in them. And I use the word here, spirit, to invite you to infuse in your own revolutionary activism, your own revolutionary spirit in dynamic, transformational, evolving action. What are the attributes of your revolution of the spirit? What gets you out of bed to, no matter what, like the prisoners of conscience in our beloved Myanmar right now, stuffed in like livestock into prison cells without medicines, many of them dying of COVID and malnutrition, others being tortured. Yet, Daw Aung San Suu Kyi, U Win Myint, U Win Tain, thousands of other men and women, monks and nuns in those prison camps in Burma, those labor camps, and they're dying in droves, both by COVID and by torture and by persecution and torture. They keep alive a revolution of the spirit. Activism as a state of mind. Okay, pause there. I don't know about you, but one of the things that I love doing the most, especially in the morning, is I want to say meditating. And I cannot encourage you enough, if you're into my life or into my work or into my suggestions on transformational practices, meditate. So many ways to understand meditation. There's so many ways to misconceive meditation. But let me just simply share with you, just for a few minutes, meditate if you choose in the morning. Disengage from, how would I put it, guided meditations on apps. Get over those dependencies and go right back into the fertile, organic, conscious ground of your own heart and being. It's all right there, isn't it? A revolution of the spirit means that I am empowering a love of my own self-worth, a radical self-respect for the way that I sit and move and talk and think and feel and process and share and give and listen and touch and move and dress and bathe and anoint and rest and sleep and give and come back and do it again and again. What gives us that rejuvenation, if you will, to do something so repetitively as a prisoner of conscience, stuffed like livestock in a prison cell, but yet they stand and they walk, many of them, sure, they're suffering beyond imagination. But it's a country emboldened by a revolution of the spirit, making activism a state of mind. Unrelenting, revolutionary love of freedom all over the world right now. We are drawing strength from the ethical, moral, spiritual intelligence of the revolutionaries in Myanmar, but not just in Burma alone. All around the world there are prisoners of conscience. There are other men and women in every country right now protesting, standing up. But what sets us apart is that we have deep, deep regard for spirit. There's something in that word for me that allows us to sanctify our own consciousness as we would going to the cathedral of our religious choice, to make prayer as a meditative promise of inner being, saturating our interiors with prayer as an experience that emboldens ethical wisdom, mindful courage to do what? To care enough about the sanctity of life, the role of the activist, to care enough about the sanctity of life, that we devote our day, our month, our life as much as humanly possible to safety, to honor, to freedom, to the love of the dream, dictatorship and totalitarianism and coercion and threats and violence and torture and all the ways in which dictatorial governments around the world denigrate. They want to take from us spirit, dream, creativity, a love of freedom of conscience. They want to take our hearts. And why am I going on about this at this time? I feel that the dialogue about the Great Reset is not a conspiratorial thought. Totalitarianism as a psychology, I'm going to get more into that, which I've studied now for nearly 4 decades. Totalitarianism as a psychology, the cult of absolutism and certainty. And equal to that, the cult of persecution by making wrong those who love freedom. It is our moment to stand and rise up in the power, if you will, of saying enough is enough as vocation of our lifestyle. My Dharma, my yoga, my meditation, my citizenship with my soul is deeply rooted in freedom as a state of mind and a revolution of the spirit as a vocation of my presence. I'm not going to practice activism as much as I'm going to live in revolutionary elevation of freedom. Okay. First third of this little sharing today. Meditation. I would suggest that when you sit, just in sitting meditation, let it be so empowering, so nurturing, so authentic that you occupy the innate. Hear the word innate. Drop concentration and effort on an object or the breath or being mindful of feelings or emotions or sensations, but just co-occupy innate qualities that give freedom and revolutionary spirit, the stamina and the power that those words point to. Call it the nutrition, the oxygen of self-worth, dignity. So when we sit in meditation, for those first 2, 3, 4, 5 minutes, if that's all you sit, go right down in there, take a physical posture, cross your legs in a way that's comfortable, place your hands somewhere, let the breathing breathe on its own. And what I do, regenerate, occupy, elevate, evolve, repeat. Regenerate, restore, occupy my own innate sense of dignity. And right there for a couple of minutes, root in an affirmation, make a cognitive, conscious, spiritualized, holy decree. My day will be rooted in ethical intelligence, moral courage. I refuse to participate as much as humanly possible in my own process of conditions and vulnerability and uncertainties and struggles. To be an upright person, I will stand and walk with a sense of dignity and cool and poise and regard for restraint and engagement. Restraining denigrating states of mind and elevating the good, the true, and the beautiful. I am dedicating my life, a holy decree in my meditation, to root in the sanctity of my innate dignity. There's nothing to cultivate there except to occupy. We don't need to grow lungs every time that we breathe. Occupy, occupy, occupy freedom as a state of mind. A state of being. The soul of freedom for me is dignity. That which nurtures my dignity are the roots of conscience, the attributes of right and wrong and good and bad, and knowing how to discern those dyads in ways that empower the roots and nurture my consciousness and give me a sense of soulfulness within my own spirit. Keep it so simple. Sit, occupy the innate dignity, commit through decree. I dedicate this day to the virtues of empowering freedom as a state of consciousness, and I will dedicate my life through voice, through thought, and through the simplest, most ordinary actions to be an occupant, to be a citizen of a revolution of the human spirit. I am dedicating my life, my breath, my movement to the future and to the present rootedness of freedom. Take away our freedom and we'll suffer the greatest loss. Pause halfway through. I love America. I love my country. I love planet Earth. I love being a human. I love being alive. And that comes with radical responsibility to uphold the virtues and the declarations and the independence and the holiness and the sanctity of my culture and my planet. I bring this up to remind us that we live in radically free countries that are radically flawed. However, those of you who live under dictatorship live behind the firewall in China, constructed by a lot of money from America and around the world, enacted on a momentary level, day after day, by the nuclear-powered bioweapon premier of China, Xi Jinping. To live in dictatorship, to live under a totalitarian armor, to live in the constraints of authoritarianism and Stalin-esque, Mao-esque behaviors. Right now, those words, those minds, those memes are spreading around the world. There is, and be clear, a global war on democracy. It's everywhere right now, and it is rapidly spreading around the planet in overlapping, nearly invisible tsunamis and convulsions. We do not know what next week will bring. No one could have imagined. Yes, they probably could have. A lot of what's coming down right now seems to have been enacted years before, even decades back. The receipts and the facts are there, setting that aside for those people who know that well. But we are in a war, an information war, a digital war. And it may very well, I'm not an alarmist, I'm a pragmatist with a little bit of poetry in my soul. We may very well be in a kinetic war. Many people in the world are already in kinetic wars or under the fire of those kinetic wars, leaving areas, Burma, as refugees, displaced people, imprisoned, shot in your own home. Hong Kong, imprisoning for life activists for doing what I am doing right now on the city streets of that beloved city. When will they come knocking? When will they come hunting? When will we end up in the gulags of planet Earth imprisonment? Right now is a time for all of us, and I say this as I come closer to the end, to take so seriously the role of activism, the role of freedom, the role of global country-based citizenship. Breathe it in our meditation, in our yoga. the yoga of self-actualization to innate qualities of dignity and revolutionary power, to use freedom as the very source of my integrity. I'm going to be an activist by being alive to the virtues of freedom in action. Sitting, the innate dignity of being rooted in ethical principle. In-breath, out-breath. Allow that smile to come forth from within, to know that you are up to soulful date. I am who I am, embodied as I am, feeling myself as I am, knowing to mindfully disengage from narratives or thoughts or patterns or conditions of behavior, atmospheres within consciousness that are natural, disengage and occupy. Occupy the beauty of your being. I will come to the end here. The beauty of your being. And I use the word here, innate beauty of your being. You are absolutely cool and rad as you are. Anyone who's ever done meditation or ever done yoga, who does meditation, who does Dhamma, who does Dharma, who does spirituality, who does holiness, who does the revolution of the spirit, who's a political prisoner in a prison camp somewhere in the world today, could be you, could be me, who knows about cancellation going into torture, who knows what's going to come down the pike next month, next year, next minute. Innate revolutionary occupation of who I am as I am, filled with Dhamma power, yoga power, spiritual power, a revolution of the spirit, freedom as a state of mind. Stop listening to dysfunctional psychological issues that put you into deficit consciousness, dysfunctional consciousness. Thinking that you need to heal in order to be real, to be out of the prison camp of culturally sanctioned, spiritually sanctioned, psychologically sanctioned, denigrating attitudes that keep you in a perpetual state of healing and weakness. Innate meditation, revolutionary of the spirit meditation, prisoner of conscience meditation, those rare beings in those prison camps in Burma, they are teaching us, giving us a very radical, beautiful, tragic lesson. In-breath, dignity. Out-breath, doubt. In-breath, spiritual power. Out-breath, denigrating fear. In-breath, enlightening revolution. Out-breath, fear of persecution. That is Dhamma, that is revolution to me, that is yoga in action. So as I end today, thank you for being in my life. Lots going on in my personal life here on the island of Maui. I will continue to do, God willing, my live streams here at 9:30 in the morning. I have a very special guest on Sunday, Raj, a renowned, very rare healer, savant, alchemist, plant medicine revolutionary who studied over many decades the deep indigenous plant medicine herbs and extracts here in the Hawaiian Islands, as well as the American Native Indians, the East Indian subcontinent, China, South America. And we are in a time where the restoration of Earth. Let me pause for a minute before I go further into talking about this gentleman and about the live stream on Sunday, where we'll have an extended chance to talk at 9:30 here from Hawaii, perhaps even 90 minutes, maybe even 2 hours. I don't know why there isn't a greater outrage at the insanity of the human species and the behavior that we see around the world. It's somewhat shocking, if not radically shocking, that we as humans, by and large, have created a wrecking ball for the future of life. That we're heading headlong into an irretrievable apocalypse. You hear the word, the sixth mass extinction. We've had 5 before, but never before have we had one driven specifically by a species known as the Homo sapien. Having gone from a few thousand people in one particular theory of 300,000-400,000 years ago, 5, 6, 10,000 humanoids out of Central Africa began to migrate and move, and it said wherever they went, they either outproduced local populations or through calculated acts of mass murder exterminated them. Welcome to July 28, 2021. 8 billion of us, something like 250,000 humans born every day onto this blue-green sphere, orbiting a sunball. All the psychedelic ways to describe, oh my God. And here we are as a predator species that has normalized, institutionalized violence upon non-humans. It's really, really amazing, the normalization of narratives to allow, I'm going to give a talk about it soon, the normalization of narratives that allow, very much like what happened in World War II with the normalization of genocide of the so-called deplorables and the undesirables. 10, 11, 12, 20 million people died of disease and systematic so-called extermination. Human beings treated like livestock today. The mass factory farming, the mass genocide of non-humans. I mean, to me, there is something so outrageous about that, right? I'm going to try to find new language, new emotions, if you will, to communicate outrage. It's sort of like, could there ever be enough outrage in our own life if we were to really see that freedom as a state of mind and the revolution of the spirit and belonging to the soulful occupation of global citizenship? What do we do today in our lives to not normalize mass extermination of nature, mass extermination of the animals, the fish in the oceans, the mass extermination of the ecosystem, the mass extermination of the salmon, the mass extermination of arable land through my behavior and your behavior and the mass of the human behavior. It's like we're all the conductor and the occupant on the train to the death camp. And as David Suzuki, the great environmentalist out of Vancouver, Canada, said decades ago, we're like occupants in a car headed straight into the brick wall of self-annihilation, and we're, in my language, either chanting Om Namah Shivaya or mindfully watching our breath in the back seat. The driver's in some kind of phantasmagorical narrative about the boy or the girl he can't wait to be with. Meanwhile, that car are 8 billion of us on the planet. There are exceptions. And extinction, with millions of non-humans going extinct as well, based upon one particular species, the human, excuse me. And it's not business as usual, but it's like, I don't understand why people don't completely fall apart and scream and go on rampages. But maybe that's what they do. Maybe that's what we're seeing on the planet today. Maybe this so-called conspiratorial depopulation theory that seems to be happening is to rid our species of 7.5 billion people, to reboot, reset the human clock on planet Earth, to try to regenerate and get off the course of consumerist action and the blindness of what we've done with fossil fuels and greed, extreme greed, abject greed, toxic greed. To me, activism is the confrontation to greed. Freedom is the confrontation to stupidity. And I want to close today. Part of coming to terms with dignity is, I would call it a self-outrage at only you can talk to yourself in a way in which you're privy and aware to that car going into the brick wall of self-annihilation. You're the conductor and the passengers in that death train to the death camp. What are we doing in the name of existence that's normalized self-annihilation, denigration, collusion with torture, collusion with genocide, global genocide of humans, of non-humans, of trees and plants, the air, the rivers, the birds, the light, the planet itself. I know only when I don't do, but if I did put my hand in a fire, would I feel the heat? It's a rare individual who can feel the heat of the collective behavior of all of us, except that the forests are burning and the heat waves are denigrating the earth. The oceans are acidifying. We're becoming an uninhabitable planet, and we're taking out non-humans as well. And so when I talk about freedom as a state of mind and making activism a way of life, empowering our dignity isn't just to feel better about spending and consuming, obviously. It's my point here is there's something about shaking our souls, cracking, really going down in with your own cognitive purgative, your own plant medicine, your own radical dose of spiritual ayahuasca that so disrupts the trauma of your own narcissism. Yeah, that's the word, the trauma of your unrecognized narcissism. Isn't that the core of the devil? And I did my part with writing the book Extinction X-Rated. I did a literary Dharma mandala that is the highest octane literary ayahuasca that I could communicate through image and emotion to upset the quo of the collective, myself included. But, and I close here again, I'm sorry to keep pretending to close, but I kind of feel that it's life and death, that we need to reinvent revolution, activism, boldness, risk-taking to such an extent that, date me to one of those 60s poetic, acid-activated, war-hating, Hendrix-loving teenagers, which I was. And I loved Motown and I loved Aretha. But when I heard Jimmy, my life changed. And when I put acid into that equation, I began to activate an independent thinking that was so unthinkably unsettling, but so vitalizing. When I talk about screaming, it isn't to think about the projection of contraction. It's like to radically strip off your clothes and make love in the most erotic, revolutionary way to keep a freedom alive that's never been done before, right? We need explosive expressions of activism right now. With music, with dance, with theater, with plants, with each other. We need truth serum telling revolution, overcoming sweet talk, pretending, and hustling our workshops and our views and our influence. And done, man, done. Where's the outrage that we're going into the brick wall of a collective extermination? I once heard a Holocaust survivor, Congressman Tom Lantos. I was blessed with an endorsement by him that I co-authored with my colleague Leslie Kane, a book that we did called Burma's Revolution of the Spirit, a photographic book. And in an interview, he was asked, "You spent 5 years in Auschwitz. You endured unthinkable evil, darkness, and suffering. What memory do you bring from within those years in the death camp that you would share as virtue for the world to hear today?" And he said, "My memory of an experience isn't in the death camp." Paraphrasing here. Obviously, there were many moments in those years that are indelible. But it was on the train platform, herded in like animals, and we knew where we were going, we knew our fate, and we allowed it. We were herded onto the platform like animals. We knew where we were going. We knew our fate. And right there, this is so rad. We knew our fate. We knew where we were going. 20 million exterminated. And we didn't resist. Right there is my point. Meditative dignity, meditative screaming, meditative revolution of the spirit, freedom as a state of mind, freedom as a state of mind. I'm on that train platform. I'm on that train. The normalization of conformity, the normalization of what you're told to do, the normalization of get into the car. We knew where we're going. We knew our fate. And the congressman said, but we didn't resist. And it was asked, what would you have done? I am uttering words that have almost no relevance to me except as an inspiration and as a hope that I would even remotely have the courage to even think them, much less do them. And he said, I would have, should have, could have had the moral muscle, the conscience, the self-respect for the love of freedom to throw my body in front of that train on the tracks, and no matter what happened, to put my body right there in front of that locomotive of conformity, of authoritarianism, of toxic, evil, satanic dictatorship, of Charles Schwab in Davos, and all of the Gatesian and all of the totalitarian march of do as I say, Xi Jinping, all dictators in the making, boys and girls around the world that are running dogs in collusion with totalitarianism and dictatorship and slavery and communism and persecution. And is it really about the depopulation of 7.5 billion of us? Are we now entering the Fourth Reich, where we must consider, like the great Congressman Tom Lantos, a survivor of Auschwitz, is telling us, who's now passed away, what I would have done in retrospect to do my part in keeping freedom as a state of mind, in empowering activism as a way of life, putting my body on the tracks in front of the locomotive. I close. I promise. May we collectively identify the train and the tracks. And what does it mean if we're on that platform today? We already know the boys and girls, the men and women are in the prison camps in Burma. They're already in their Dachau. Many of them are dying by the day, being killed and tortured. And around the world, how many other men and women are in silence now, dying of torture and persecution by dictatorships and totalitarian evil men and women? The war is on right now in our own country of America. Around the world, we must rise up, right? We can't scream dignity alive enough. And what will we do to identify those trains wanting to enslave us, to put us in the death camps of their conformity? Let us refuse conformity. Let us refuse authoritarianism. Let us not fear those particular invenerating formations historically coming to the surface today through unthinkable toxic greed and ignorance. The war is on. I end with one word: fight, uniquely in respect to your dignity. And as Daw Aung San Suu Kyi introduced me back in 95, or was it in 88, to the revolution of the spirit. Every one of us are global citizens today of freedom and democracy, or we're in collusion with dictatorship and totalitarianism in all the ways in which we conform and cower and normalize the tidal wave of oppression. I say, let's stop the car from hitting the brick wall, as David Suzuki predicts. Let's take over the train, remove the conductor, derail it, pull the tracks up, and let's join a global revolution of the human spirit, a revolution of consciousness, rooted in conscience and dignity. So may I invite you to invite me, to invite our friends, wherever we are in the world today. The war on democracy is happening, and guess what? The war on the totalitarian, globalist, communists. It's time to take up resistance. From my heart to yours, thank you for tuning in. Fight. Hope to see you tomorrow. Thank you.